college football has so many issues. We all understand this. We all agree to that. It's a flawed sport. Now, how flawed is really where we start to have the conversation, but we can all acknowledge that it's not a one size fits all solution to get it to where the majority of people are going to be happy. It's kind of like superhero movies. Everyone has their own idea or perception of who Spider-Man is and what Spider-Man should look like on the big screen, or the same thing could be said for Batman, Superman, all these different things. So there's not this one size all fits solution when we talk about college football. But what would be a decision that could fix the majority of problems? And I think if we were to look at scheduling and conferences and depicting who is the best from each respective conference, as we have shifted into the year three now, I think that's fair to say, of these mega conferences, these bloated conferences. And we've seen some real consequences, some negative side effects from these large expanded conferences like the SEC, and then really with the Big Ten as well, where they're at 16, 18 teams. And from each team respectively, there's a lot of parity, or I would say variance, in what's a really difficult schedule and what's a very easy schedule. I mean, just look at Florida versus Texas A&M. It's apples and oranges in terms of level of difficulty. And frankly, you could attest that to maybe the program's completely fallen off a cliff. You had projected maybe Auburn or Florida to step up. We could go into the nuances of scheduling, but you know what's a difficult one. Florida had a really difficult one, and A&M had a lighter schedule. And partially due to the fact that there are so many teams, and it's not like you have a 12-game schedule and you're only playing conference teams. You have a non-conference schedule. You have your cupcakes, and you have the SEC that's only playing 8 conference games. As of this season, it will be 9, and the same thing can be said for the Big Ten. You're not going to be able to play everybody. So there's this crazy variance in scheduling, which presents a lot of challenges when we get to college football playoff, and you have to go to the at-large teams, and you have to see, is this 11-1 team really that good, or is this 10-2 team that went through a gauntlet of a schedule? I think of Texas this past year. Should they get the benefit of the doubt? Cutting down the expanded conferences would fix so many of the issues. So I did a little bit of a thought experiment where I started writing down what would be my ideal power teams, my power conferences. We're not focused on the group of 5, because if we go down that rabbit hole of why I think the group of 5 should have their own playoff, why I think they should be on their own division, we'll be here all day. I'm focused on the power 4, really the power 2 at this point, but we have to include the Big 10 or the Big 12 and the ACC, even though we can all acknowledge that the Big 10 and the SEC are on a different level. And I as I started to write this out, you're going to notice a theme that we're going back to the original conferences, not copy and paste. Like, for example, some of the other ones that you'll see, we're not taking everyone that was part of this conference and placing them in another one. It's a modernized version of it. For example, when we look at the Southwest Conference, and people have already given me this feedback on TikTok. Yeah, it's a lot of Texas teams. Newsflash, Texas has a lot of schools, and football is a big focus in that sport. You're talking to someone that was born and raised in the state of Texas. It's a big deal. So to have a conference that is perfectly curated for just the passion that goes into what I feel like is my home state and in the surrounding areas of that. I mean, just look at the 9 teams here, and in a 8-game conference schedule, you play everybody, and you would be able to get a very clear depiction of the hierarchy of these teams. And look at the attached strings across the board. I mean, A&M has rivalries with Texas, Arkansas, a little bit with Texas Tech and Oklahoma, but they have strings attached to all of these teams, Texas included. You could point to all of the higher, like the teams like Texas, who has been able to scale up in the 2020s. Texas Tech has been tenfold scaled up and has become the dominant force within the Big 12. TCU made a national championship this decade. SMU made a college football playoff. Oklahoma made a college football playoff. Oklahoma State, I believe, won the Big 12 in the 2020s. They didn't make the college football playoff because it was only 4 teams. And then Arkansas would be the bottom feeder here. But we could even point to Houston, who has invested time and time again with their respective football program. And this would be the perfect conference to truthfully get a clear depiction of who is the best of the best. And that's the important fact of this is there would be no question of what's a difficult schedule, what's not a difficult schedule. I mean, we could point to maybe the non-conferencing, of course, but to really crown a conference champion, you would know exactly who the top 2 teams were because they played everybody. We could even point to the Big Ten. Now, in all honesty, as I was writing this out, I had to be completely honest and say this is fantasy. What is, the Stadium Pulse or Tegan's perfect college football world? In my perfect college football world, Notre Dame joins the schedule. We have to talk about the big golden helmet elephant in the entire room in the second column. Notre Dame, in my opinion, if you were deciding between the ACC or the Big Ten, I'm leaning towards the Big Ten. That's because from my perspective, when we talk about what aligns with the values of the Big Ten, to me, it feels like Notre Dame fits in with the standard that is Big Ten football. They're in the state of Indiana. They would be with Indiana. They have strong ties against Ohio State and all these other programs. It just feels right. And then you throw in the extra caveat that when we were trying to build out the ACC, it was a larger conference, very much like the Big Ten. And it would have felt like overkill to add Notre Dame in there. Whereas we're taking a Big Ten team out of here. If you've already put the dots together, you know exactly which team I'm talking about, and put Notre Dame in with a lot of the familiar faces that you've known and loved with the Big Ten Conference. The SEC, we're going back to the roots. The SEC, when you think of this conference, when you see that logo, maybe with a lighter tint of blue, you know exactly what teams come to mind. And it's not Texas, it's not A&M, it's not Oklahoma. Although great additions to the conference, Missouri included, the forgotten stepchild of the SEC, these teams, these brands, these logos is exactly what you think of when talking about the SEC. We did make one change outside of obviously taking the additional teams out. Georgia Tech was one of those teams in the ACC where I was like, where could I shift some of the larger ACC teams that could live with maybe living in another conference? Clemson came to mind, Florida State came to mind, but for me, Georgia Tech with the ties to Georgia just felt right going into the SEC without rocking the boat too much. If we were adding like a big brand like a Clemson and all these different teams to the SEC, it would definitely bolster the conference, but you would kind of lose what was the original feel of the conference. Whereas I think Georgia Tech doesn't rock the boat. Plus, they've made a ton of progression in what their football program looks like. So I think it would be a great addition as well. This is where we throw a curveball. The Big Eight. Now, if you did not know, the Southwest Conference lived for a very long time, and it almost felt like you got the Big Eight here. A lot of the Southwest, as it was beginning to die off, jumped to the Big Eight, and then we got what was the modern day Big 12 for a very long time. Or not the modern day, really the old school Big 12, because nowadays it's more modern. And this is almost kind of the way I looked at it was truthfully, you got a mixed bag. Like you couldn't take away all the teams that had made the jump from the group of five to the power four. I think the only team that's missing here, and truthfully, I'm not saying they shouldn't be here, I just didn't know where to put them, was UCF. I didn't put them in here, frankly, for the fact that it would be just such an anomaly of having. I understand we have BYU and Pitt in the same conference, but then adding a Florida school would have just been way too much of a curveball. But there's so many connective tissue. I've had feedback of people saying that Oklahoma State should have been there, but then you go to the Southwest Conference, and it's already 9 teams. You're going to be cutting it down to 7. You can't do that. You have Kansas State, Missouri and Kansas, Colorado, Nebraska, and there could still be some ties there where maybe we could have Nebraska playing Oklahoma, but then you have West Virginia and Pitt. You still have Iowa State in there. BYU gets thrown in there. I'd be fine if you wanted to maybe say BYU should be an independent if you're going to put Notre Dame as an independent. This is the one that I'm open to the most feedback on, but I really do like having this conference and having the old school Big 12 gets split in half like it originally was, because there's just too many teams that if you were to throw them onto one conference, we run into the exact issue that we're trying to solve. The ACC is pretty standard. The only main swap we made here was Maryland. It's a founding member of the ACC. They never feel like a Big Ten team because they're an ACC team at heart. And I think this is just an incredible conference overall. It is a little bit larger, but with the quality of football programs, I think a little bit of a larger conference is completely fine in this instance. And lastly, the one that I have the most emotion towards without it being my favorite schools, the Pac-12. Without Colorado, because I put Colorado in the Big Eight because of their rivalries and ties, and it felt like it matched a little bit more. You would get the blend of the Pac-12 and the Pac-10, the original name. You would get the Pac-11. And in this conference, it's such a damn shame that truthfully we got the best year of its existence during my lifetime, which was 2023, when you had the Michael Penix, Caleb Williams, Utah with Cam Rising, all these different pieces, an incredible year just for it to just go away and break off, and you get these mega conferences. The death of the Pac-12. What a beautiful logo, by the way. And Pac-12 at night, like all these different things. It is an antithesis of what destroyed college football. I'm not calling it a destroyed sport, but the death of it was really a nail in the coffin of some of what made college football really special to me. And bringing it back here for the Power Six would just make so much sense to the sport of college football. Now, we could talk about what the format of that college football playoff would look like. I'm going to just keep it at a very high level for you guys. With the Power Six, now this is under the fantasy world where there's a group of 5 playoff. So the group of 5 would not get an automatic bid. We could find a way to get them in there, obviously. But this world we're going to work off of, there is not a group of 5 representative. So very simply put, conference championship weekend becomes almost like a play-in. No, it becomes a play-in game to go to the college football playoff. Simply put. And then you grab the champions of each conference, you rank them, go 1 through 6. The top 2 teams get a bye week. More times than not, it's going to be the SEC and the Big Ten. And then you have 3 through 6 go and play, and it's a normal tournament. Very simply put, you don't have this long, drawn-out process of a 24-team playoff. You know exactly who the conference champions are. If you wanted to get the right team to win it, you should have won the game, very simply put, and you keep it. You keep it simple. That's all you have to do. I'm open to feedback, but this is how I would run it if I was the commissioner of college football for whatever reason. So I am open to hearing feedback, and let me know your thoughts.